Good morning, everyone. So today will be our lecture on ethics, which was supposed to be done yesterday, but due to some technical limitations, we could not do it. So we'll be putting it today itself. Fine. Thank you for your cooperation and appreciation and participation. Okay, whatever endeavor we are doing. And in this series, ethics is obviously a very important area. Considering when we talk about the UPSC examination now, ethics is an area which became instantly quite, controversial. Okay, that what exactly is the domain of study? What should we study in ethics? Okay, who should teach ethics? The philosophy teacher should teach ethics, or the history teacher can teach ethics, or for that matter, literature people are teaching ethics, or pub teacher should teach ethics. Fine, but you see, everybody jumped into the fray, right? And that's really quite impressive that everyone wanted to teach ethics, and that is, as a matter of fact, it is quite okay also, because you have been studying ethics since long time. We all have been taught ethics since long time, and every day our parents are telling us something to do, right? Since the childhood itself, we are being told what to do, what not to do. And grandparents are one of the biggest teachers, okay, giving us with the ethical and moral concerns of life, right? So everyday life we are being taught about what ethics is, what is ethical, what is not ethical, and more so in Indian society, or in our societies, it becomes very unique that uh, the moment a child is born, fine, okay, the moment someone gets married, the moment you can say you start a family, the moment you want to do something, fine, there are certain religious rituals and so many other things associated with them. Fine, there are certain procedures which are involved in everything that we do, right? So you must have seen, even if you open a shop, people from different religions put their religious symbols, right? And people do a puja in general, fine, or they pray before doing something, and that is quite common throughout the world, no doubt. But when you think of India, India is obviously religiously rich, a diverse country. So here we have lots of do's and don'ts related to the religion and culture, right? So we were wondering, like, what is the best way to make you understand what is ethics about, right? Now, uh, as far as the UPSC syllabus is concerned, right, the why ethics, or why the subject of ethics had to be brought in, why the domain of ethics became so important suddenly, right? If you read about ethics in governance in second ARC, right? If you read that ethics in governance, a report on the ethics in administration, basically. So you'll find out that there have been concerns raised about ethical administration, and at least in the era of good governance that we talked about. So you must be knowing what good governance is. Okay, governance is obviously about how we are governing the society, and whether the society is accepting the modes of the exercise of authority, the distribution of resources, and provision of food, provision of you can say various services that we need as a society. So how government is providing it, and how people are accepting it, whether people are accepting it or not, that is really all the concerns of governance. So governance basically involves around how policy decisions have to be implemented, right? Now, when the concern for good governance emerges, let's say from 1987, the World Bank agenda comes on good governance. So a bigger concern for what exactly is that good in governance, okay, that emerged. So you can say that was one of the initial impetus to the study of ethics, or something known as good ethical governance, right? Then we had several reports coming in. Okay. Justice Douglas report, USA, 2008, fine. And there was a report, Frank's report in UK and Europe, fine. Then there was European uh, Commission, or European Economic Communities report, EC, report on the corporate governance, right? Then 2002, Sarbanes-Oxley Act on corporate governance in US, Sarbanes-Oxley Act, like somewhere 2002. And likewise, so you can understand the ethical aspects in governance, in administration, became a very important concern. Okay. as an integrated part of the agenda of good governance, right? And if you go back to 20, 30 years back, right, when we talk about World Sustainable Summit, 1972, and where the concern for sustainable development, sustainable distribution of resources, sustainable lifestyle, okay, that emerged, and concern for water, natural resources, okay, concern for livelihood security, concern for distribution of benefits in such a manner that these benefits are transmitted equitably from one generation to generation, right? So when we think of all that agenda, you go back then, right, and then you come to Rio, okay, Rio plus 10, the Earth Summit, and so many other things. You can understand now this is a greater aspect of ethics. So when we think of ethics in administration, ethics in governance, okay, it is not just about the religious and the moral preachings that one is concerned about. It is more about how we are going to live as a society, fine? How we are going to integrate ourselves with the nature in such a manner, right, that we are able to create a just and fair society. And this equally applies not to people and the communities, but also to the governments, to the administration, to the global institutions which are involved on this process, right? Like we are going through a pandemic, we are going through a virus, and everybody is blaming China. Now, China owes a moral responsibility to the world. Being part and parcel of this globalization process, it is reaping a lot of benefits out of that, right? It has, huge economic growth because of so many other factors, which is not purely its own. So as China is a stakeholder in this entire process of benefits, okay, trade-offs, okay, resource distribution, and likewise. So China definitely owes a moral responsibility to the society, to the entire globe, okay, in that regard, if at all that is something true, right? So see, the concern for ethics emerges from this concern for justice, this concern for equitable distribution, fine, and you can say a kind of connectedness, the interconnectedness that has been emerging in this entire world, right, where a mistake made by one will have a disastrous consequence for the other, right? And you may not be knowing that, right? So interconnectedness has also created a kind of problem, right, along with certain benefits. So you can understand, if you visualize the idea of ethics in that regard, right, rather than simply concerning about the philosophical aspect of ethics, the metaphysical aspects, find the transcendental aspects, okay, the divine aspect, and all those things. That is not basically what the ethics in administration or governance of paper 2 is concerned with, right? But no doubt, when we talk about ethics as a subject, let us move it away from the ethics in governance. Let us talk about ethics as a subject, or as a particular syllabus that you have to study for paper 4, right? Now, definitely it carries 250 marks, so it has a very important relevance. Right. First thing, let me tell you very clear that whatever people say that history has a very important role to play in paper 4, or political science has a very important role to play in paper 4, or for that matter, philosophy has to play, that is not at all correct. You just go back and see the question papers. Right? The proof of pudding is in the eating. So you can just go back and see the question papers. It's not at all logical to connect all the papers to ethics. Obviously, it is. We as human beings, wherever we will be, whatever we will do, there will be ethical concern. That does not mean that I will link mathematics to also ethics. Obviously, a mathematician also has to be ethical. Fine, a physicist, a scientist has to be ethical, but that does not mean that I link the physics or mathematics as subject to ethics. That is not correct. Fine. Why public administration as a subject will become important for ethics, fine, or sociology for that matter, right? Because the logic is that when we are talking about the society, the administration, the state, and their relationship, fine, the entire policy making, the policy implementation, and its consequences that are created. That means the decision making is coming from the authority system. The authority system is largely responsible for promoting, propagating, preserving, and at the same time allowing the participation of people in this entire ethical process, or making this process ethical enough for people to get accommodated in this process. So it is all those people in power, it is all the institutions of power which are more relevant to the understanding of this ethics, right? But definitely when we categorize it as a subject now, so there are the discipline aspect of ethics. is also a very relevant area to be studied. Fine. So you know that a part comes as theoretical part. So if I simply divide it, let us say, so you have a theoretical part, which is your given in the syllabus. Almost half of the syllabus deals with the theoretical part, or let us say not half, at least one third. Then another part deals with the administrative issues, or you can simplify it as the ethics in governance, or in terms of your word, the vocabulary of a syllabus, the probity in governance, right? The other part, one third, may be attributed to your case studies. Now, treating this study of this subject purely as this would also be illogical. Purely as this will also be illogical. That means if I provide as a teacher, I can say, this is what the ethics is, but it is just 2/3 of the paper, it's not 1/3. So a philosophy teacher may talk about this idea, right? Or a person who is more concerned with the theoretical aspect, right? Uh, Coming from more of a research background, fine, they may talk about the theoretical aspects of this. People like us coming from public administration, more action part of the government, understanding more of policy implementation, problems of policy implementation, issues related to policy implementation, failure, corruption, right to information, transparency, problems of transparency, use of technology, e-governance, and all those areas, fine, they become basically part of this. And now case studies related to this. Now, how the case studies will be interpreted? Are they just the practical examples? Now, this is also misinterpretation. Like many people teaching case studies, they are only concerned with this, that okay, administrative situations are only case studies. That is not so. When we talk about the case studies, find the case studies relates to specific situations, right? These situations may range from social, right? They may be related to the individual level, okay, community level, mass level, individual level, fine, and they may be related to the official aspects, the administrative aspects, fine. So political, administrative, and likewise. So you can think of that. Now, when we talk about the social level, the issues and the problems may arise out of very different aspects, like uh, you're witnessing a communal riot, you're part of the communal riot, you're instigating something, or you are being asked to instigate something, you are being asked to associate with certain things. Okay, then you are leading a protest, you're leading a rally, you're going for a strike, fine, you are a union leader, you want to do certain things, and likewise, fine, at the individual level, or it may be more related to religion, culture, and many other things. Now, when you talk about individual level, okay, it may be about your relationship, your family, fine, your peers, your individual perception, which dominates, or value system that dominates your behavior, your role in an organization. That can also be an aspect, right? Individual also may lead to the relationship between you and your family members, your friends, your neighborhood, and like more personalized account of problems. And this will be more the generic situational governance problems, right? Most of the case studies are dominated by this, no doubt, right? But there are case studies which are related to them, and these type of case studies obviously require a more greater understanding of the theoretical aspects, right? So if you're asked that, will you go for, you have not studied, there were certain conditions in your family, fine, your parents were ill or somebody was ill and you were in the hospital throughout the night. Okay, if you have watched the movie Three Idiots, you can see. So they go to the examination late and they want to appear for the examination. The examiner says that, no, you are not allowed to enter. So if you, let's say, imagine such kind of situation, and then someone tells you that, okay, it's okay, you have not studied, it is not your mistake, it were the circumstances which forced you to do so, so now you can go for cheating, right? I can help you in cheating, right? Now there a personal, a very individual ethical evaluation comes, right? But if you're a bureaucrat and you're taking up a tender or a project, and there is an opportunity for being corrupt or earn money for yourself or your family, there may be certain problems in the family which might compel you to do so. That is a different aspect. But you're occupying a seat of power, an official position, right? So your responsibility does not become only individual. This responsibility becomes a public responsibility, right? and likewise social. So there can be variety of situations, fine, and the variety of benchmarks or principles on which you will try to understand a particular situation and what could be the appropriate action in that situation. Now, this is all about the, let us say, the discipline and the breaking down of the discipline. Fine. In theoretical aspects, obviously, it's very important, very pertinent to understand, fine, what exactly is the domain and the scope of study of ethics as a subject. Fine. And more so, why it is important for me to study ethics. So as I told you, there was a global concern. Fine. There were a number of international conventions. Fine. United Nations Convention Against Corruption, right? Then sustainable development we talked about. Then global concerns with justice movements throughout the world, right? Community movements, local movements, grassroots movements. Okay, the globalization ushered in an era of corporatism, okay, crony capitalism, corporates acquiring a lot of land and resources in developing countries, right? The developed and developing countries are coming into a relationship of patron and client or master and slave again, post-colonialism. So there are so many other aspects of this study, right, which has to be taken into account, based on which the case studies as well as your answers would be there based. Fine. So if you take all that domain, right, that is more of the consequential aspects of our decisions and the governing process that we are going through in the world today, and where we require some ethical and moral frameworks to understand our decisions. Right? If there was a very proper ethical moral framework, there would never have been a world war. Fine. The Japan would never have been bombed. Right? We started a human genome project, you must be knowing, right? Now, why we wanted to do it? Obviously, we wanted to understand, we wanted to track the diseases, we wanted to know the precedent, the history, the physiological, the biological history of the human beings and how they have evolved, right? And what could be the genetic codes which we can know in order to problem or in order to resolve any problem, any disease, any kind of, you can say, the physiological, or you can say any kind of the break in the human evolution that we experience. So how can we overcome all that, right? And we have like stem cells, we have semen banks, we have so many things. Okay, they all raise global concerns regarding ethical behavior, okay, ethical and moral principles which will govern all this. Organ donation, right? Organ trade, organ smuggling, then surrogacy, okay, environmental ethics, technological ethics, use of technology. We are using internet, we are using all this, okay, but there are dangers of data, there are dangers of privacy, there are threats to our dignity and self-respect. Women are vulnerable to lots of exploitation, bullying, stalking, and so many problems. So you can say the domain of ethics is not that simple, it's not that easy, right? And at the same time, you can say, but it is simple enough for a person who is more aware about his surroundings, fine, who looks at the issues, who understands the issues in a more refined, in a more, you can say, critical manner. A person who is able to differentiate between what uh, is happening and what can be the consequence in future. So if you are able to just dissociate these things, if you're able to read newspaper properly, and then you are able to fathom that, okay, what exactly is happening in the society and the world, and do we have any opinions about this? Can we have any critical assessment of all this? Can we have any analysis of what is going on, and can we have any solution to rectify all these problems? So if you are aware, definitely for you, this paper becomes very easy, right? There are certain things which people make mistakes in this paper, right? They try to understand it purely theoretically, right? Or they just solve case studies. And they believe they will get 100 marks, 120 marks, 130 marks. Though this paper is like a mathematics, you can say, average scores can be much higher than 140, 150 if you do it really properly. Because there is nothing like subjectivity. People say कि solution of a case study would be subjective. मेरा अपना perception है. आपका perception की जरूरत ही नहीं. And if I take you in a class of human beings, fine, then that will be a general perception. So how you have to move from an individualized, personalized viewpoint to a more generalized viewpoint. Fine. How you have to assess a problem not merely from the perspective of what it affects me and how it affects me. Okay, and then you take it to a more global level, to a more social and communal level. That is what the idea of ethics is about. So ethics gives you a kind of consciousness, the study of ethics. Fine. Ethics provokes a kind of moral behavior. At least it exhorts you to become moral over the time. Fine. So if you don't know, read about space. Fine. You might be very critical of the aliens, right? But if you read the space properly or the space science properly, then you understand that for them we are aliens and for us we are aliens. Maybe so. If there's a life outside, okay, that is a good news, not a bad news for us, right? So until unless you study ethics, you cannot appreciate what is exploitation, right? What kind of problems are there? What is poverty? What are the consequences of poverty? What is justice and why people need justice? What is gender equality and why that is needed? Fine. So as an individual also, you'll not be very sensitive. As an institution also, you'll not be sensitive. As a public servant, you'll not be sensitive if you don't know. So it has various purposes. So this paper was introduced basically in terms of the global consensus around the ethical framework, okay, required to govern these societies. Fine. And that's showing globalization. So you might have read about WP and so many other agencies, so many international forums, where there is an ongoing rift between the developed and developing countries. Fine, a lot of logical conflicts going on, and most of them being illogical also. Why? Because developed countries have very strong say. Okay, recently US, you know, has moved out of the Open Skies Treaty, right? Citing the concerns related to Russia. Right now, these all raise global ethical concerns regarding the countries like us, right? Who may not be exactly part of that, but we may not be out of the consequences of what is happening globally, right? So we have to understand that this entire discipline, this entire domain of the study, okay, revolves around these concerns. So don't just misinterpret in a very narrow sense, reading the syllabus, reading what value is, what attitude is, what, okay, what is emotional intelligence, okay, what are the intrinsic values, what are extrinsic values. They are very small things. Okay, they can be just understood, okay, in let's say few hours of class. But what is important is how we are going to link it to the global concern, to the entire general studies that we are doing. So if I say the spillover effects of all the papers will be visible here, and the understanding of this paper would be visible in all the other papers. So it's vice versa. Fine. The better acquainted you are here, you can contribute there also. The better acquainted you are there, you can contribute here also. So you cannot see it as just subject specific, but yes, definitely subjects like public administration, sociology, fine, and for that matter, certain philosophy definitely contribute much to the understanding of public administration, right? So you can understand now. Let us talk about the theoretical aspect, fine. So theoretical aspect is related to what? And that is very important, that what is the theoretical aspect of studies, ethics? Do I need to study all the philosophies, philosophers, moral thinkers, contributors, and aptitude, values, integrity, fine, or what about the religious ethics? Okay, okay, the moral preachings of different societies for different philosophers and different cultures. Do I need to know? Right? You don't have to go about all this, fine, but definitely you have to understand, fine, the at least the simple definition of what ethics is, right? Now if I say, and with this obviously we'll start knowing the philosophers, fine. We don't need to study philosopher per se, but how philosophers have contributed to the understanding of ethics or defining ethics, that is more important, fine. So when we talk about ethics, right, coming from the word ethikos, which are some, okay, something like a set of virtues, a set of values, a set of something desirable, right, which is good, right? Now, the Greek term ethikos, and there is a term morality. Ethics and morals, or ethics and morality. Fine. Now, this comes from the term mors or moralis. Now, the biggest problem here is that when we talk to many students, and like when we teach in public administration or governance, fine, and we talk about students about corruption, issues of corruption, and what is a moral administration, what is the behavior of a moral administrator, and what should be the traits of a good ethical administrator, what are the public service values, what are the service ethics, right, codes of conduct, and so many things. When we ask them, the biggest issue comes here that people are not able to define what is ethics and what is morality. Now, I have seen, obviously, without naming anyone, so I've seen a lot of teachers who are talking about morality becomes more universal. Morality is more personal. Morality comes from culture. Fine. All said and done, that is fine. But how do you dissociate this from this? Now, let me give you a simple example. Let us say, okay, there is a boy, right? So who steals a bread, or let us say a milk packet from a shop, right? Now that person or that boy steals it, runs away, right? The shopkeeper runs after him. Few people run after him, right? Chasing the boy, they want to catch it because the boy has stolen it. Now boy becomes a thief as per their perception. When they go, okay, and they see the boy going somewhere, when they go and enter into a very small tiny room, the boy goes into, they find out that he has a mother, ailing mother, right? Or a small sister who are waiting for the food. Right? They are poor enough not to afford, or so poor not to afford a medicine or food, basic food. Now the boy stole it and went to feed them, right? As per the boy's understanding, it was a moral act to feed his mother and sister. As per the shopkeeper, it was not a moral act, it was a theft. Fine. As per the law, it was a theft. And stealing is stealing. It doesn't matter, right? Circumstances will not be very important because everybody will then start justifying their actions and behavior, right? So let us say that if we talk about this example, now there is always a relative basis of evaluation, right? So when we think of ethical or ethics, ethics is a larger evaluation of something right from left. Left here will not be the, the GNU left, but right from, let us say, wrong. Right is not always right. That is also uh, to be understood, right? So right from wrong, but how we are going to define this right, or how we are going to define this wrong. Let us say it tells us this is right. Stealing is wrong, right? It tells us this. But how did we define that something like stealing is wrong? What was the basis on which we defined it? That is immorality. So it comes from the word mores. Mores is more cultural, more local, right? Ethicos is more general. It is more universal in nature. But the logic or simple conceptual logic is that when we define right and wrong, we use certain basis, and that basis becomes immorality. So when we use this logic, we can always say that this has, or this can be universal on certain principles, and this can be, okay, also at the same time relative, right? Which we call this as absolutism, and this we can call as relativism, right? So we'll continue with this discussion over the time, right? Our idea today was just to give you a brief introduction, or be ethical, right? Being ethical is very difficult aspect, and people are hardly bothered today about being ethical. So don't take it ethical as a philosophical idea. Today's being ethical is being safe. Stay in your house, fine. Don't go out, so that you become susceptible to certain things, and then you create a problem for your family and your neighborhood. That is also being ethical, fine. So be pandemic ethical right now. We'll keep teaching you. We'll keep learning, fine. And uh, kindly trust us and participate in this process. You're going to benefit a lot, and I don't need to say that. Thank you so much for your cooperation. Already we are receiving a lot of uh, you can say compliments, and a lot of participation of people and students alike like you. Okay, thank you a lot. Take care. Stay well. Thank you.